Hello and welcome to another episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today I am making over this Matchbox Lesney number 27C Cadillac 60 Special that came out in 1960. I'm actually doing two. They came out in a variety of colours: white and pink roofs, green, silver grey or lilac bodies, and windscreens in green or clear. Now looking at these, you can see that this one in particular looks like it was owned by a family and was passed down through the generations, with each younger child having a go at giving it a new paint scheme. You can just make out some metallic green underneath this top coat here, and I believe that to be the original colour. So I'm going to be painting this one green with a off-white roof. The other one, I don't know what colour it came out in originally, but I'm opting for the lilac body and a pink roof. Underneath I noticed that both rear tow hooks are broken off, so I'm going to have to try and fix those. Now looking at Roger Darkin's book here, excellent source of information, freely downloadable off the internet. You can see all the different variations here. So I'm going to be doing that top one, number 1, and I'm going to be doing number 5. There's a price guide there as well. It's a little bit outdated now, but gives you an idea. Now, to make up these colours, I'm going to be using quite a few different paints and a mixture of Tamiya and Mr. Hobby. That pink isn't quite the right pink, so I'm going to have to dumb it down somehow and make it into a rather drab 60s pink. And I'm also going to top coat it with these SMS branded metallic paints. They're absolutely fantastic, and they are from a local supplier near Melbourne. So I did some experimentation and I found out to make lilac you need blue and red. With the experimentation to try to mimic this metallic lilac, I'm using 1 part blue, 4 parts red and 1 part silver. Here's an old car I had that was sanded back to the metal, and I just put some test samples of paint on there, and I'm thinking that one at the top right there that I'm pointing to now is the closest I came. So that's the recipe that's marked on the map there, so I don't forget. Now sorry if this gets a little bit boring, but I'm going to mix up some paint. Some people have asked me, why do I just wing it tipping the paint in out of the bottle? Well, today I'm trying out a new technique where I'm taking a measured dose by using a hollow straw and sticking my finger over the end of it, which means I'm withdrawing the exact same amount from each pot, as these all started off at the same level. So there's your 4 red and 1 blue, and I've just added the 1 part silver here, and mix it up and see what it looks like. This is the first time ever I've mixed up lilac. Doesn't look much in the pot, but I'm sure when it's on the vehicle it's going to look pretty nice. There you can see it's a bit thick and gluggy because I've just put it on there with a cotton bud, but when it's sprayed on I'm hoping for a top result. Now remember those glasses that somebody sent me, those little shot glasses? I thought they were undersized. Turns out they're used in churches. Well, I started off using those to mix my paint, and when I picked the first one up, this is what happened. The only thing is, it was full of paint at the time. The base came off and it spilt all over my shorts. So I'm going to have to get some new shorts now. As usual, I'm drilling out these rivets to remove the base so I can paint it. That's another thing I didn't tell you about. The bases are red on these ones. They did come out in black, but both of these are red. So I'm going to restore them back to their original colour. When I pulled this apart, I was somewhat surprised to see the rear wheels fell off without any intervention. There's one there. And I thought, that's unusual. Then I started to look at the other ones, and this one here fell off as well. Now it didn't dawn on me that these wheels are actually held on this model by the overlapping body at the rear. It's obvious here, but at the time I wasn't looking at it. Have a look at the state of that windscreen. I hope it's not stuck in place with all that paint. Here's a close-up of the axle, and you can see there's no flange on the end of it. So I thought that this gold paint was some form of metal solder that a previous owner had repaired it with, and when I looked at this with the naked eye, I thought it was cracked. I went, aha, that explains it. That's why the wheels fell off. The guy pulled it apart, welded the crack, and then put it back together, but didn't know how to form that head on the end of the axle. That was me, making all these assumptions, and everyone was wrong, as you will see later. Now I'm going to remove this axle, and somebody suggested putting a washer there to prevent damage to the wheel. Well, as you can see, it lasted about 1/10 of a second and went shooting off across the floor, and I guess it went under the corner cupboards because I could not find it anywhere. So back to the old style of putting my thumb in jeopardy, just holding that wheel back away from the spinning, grinding drum, and it all worked well. So that was my usual method that I adopted today. And they just pull off like that. And they're in pretty good condition, I felt. This one here was a bit stubborn. Had to get the pliers on there and use a bit of force. Turned out the axle was bent. That wasn't helping any. Now I'm going to remove the transparencies. Once again, I'm showing you this modified drill that has a shallow cut. That way the tip of the drill does not penetrate the roof before it's removed the majority of the rivet that's holding the transparency in. And that just pops out with gentle finger pressure, and there you can see there's no damage to the roof. If I'd used a normal drill, it would have made a dimple there, or at worst come through. Now that these models have been disassembled, it's time to strip the paint. Before I do that, I'm just going to chuck all these bits in a container, a repurposed rice bowl, so that they don't get lost. Using my poly stripper paint stripper, which is my most popular method of paint stripping. It's the only one I use actually. I did try hitting it with a heat gun once, it didn't work. And I have used caustic soda that resulted in a couple of broken glass bowls, but apart from that, this is my preferred method. So I'm slapping it on pretty thick, and this paint, there's multiple layers here, and I dare say it's lead paint, who knows, but it's pretty strong stuff, doesn't budge too easily. So I'm going to let it sit in this enclosed container for half an hour. See whether the paint is easier to remove. Well, that came off there quite easily. I'm using rubber gloves here, note too. By using the rubber gloves, it makes it a lot easier at this stage because you're actually handling the model and you can rotate it around as and when needed. If you hold it with forceps or pliers, it can be a little bit awkward from time to time. You have to keep putting it down, picking it up again. There's the base. You can see it clearly says Cadillac number 27. Here's some of the detail. These particular corners here on the lower edge of the front bumper were very, very packed with paint. And this took me a long time to clean all these little holes out. These rear tail lights here, they were plugged up. So luckily I got these dental tools, and I just kind of did this for half an hour or so and got all these little bits and pieces out. Underneath here it's loose. It's not causing a problem now, but if you leave this here, when you spray the paint, some of these flakes can come loose and adhere to the new paint, which can be a nightmare. So you've got to be very careful to get everything off. Now in this instance, on the front there in that grille, the paint was clinging on for dear life, and because it's recessed, it's very awkward to get at. Using this wire wheel helped, but I still had to resort to some picks and pins to actually clean it all out. Very, very time consuming, this model. A lot of detail in it for Matchbox. They've done a good job on it. So this is them both now ready for undercoating. Prior to doing that, I give them a buff over with that wire wheel, and I give them a scrub with some bronze wool, hopefully to try and smooth out the finish, blend in some of the casting lines, make them look less obvious. Here I'm doing the bases. Again, these wire wheels wear eye protection because those little wires fly off from time to time. You wouldn't want to get one in the eye. Now here I'm showing you the snapped off ends of the tow bar. That one there looks like it's been done deliberately and filed down. Again, I'm thinking more evidence of a prior restoration. Here's an original model that I've got that I haven't decided whether I'm going to do it over yet or leave it as is because it's not too bad. But I'm using it. It's handy to have it A as a colour reference for the first model, and B, as you can see here, it's got a perfect tow bar on it, and I'm using it with some paper tape there and a pencil to make a template. Now, you may have seen a couple of videos ago, there's this butchered taxi that I've been robbing metal off of. Well, today I'm going to take some of the roof and make a couple of new tow bar tongues. That's the plan. Whether or not I can pull it off, I don't know, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Now, I'm just measuring the thickness of the metal, the original metal, and it was just about 1 millimeter. Now the roof section here registers as 1.1, but it's because there's a little bit of a burr there, I just noticed. So I knock that back with the file and measure it again. Now it's just under 1 millimeter. I would have liked it to have been exact, but do you know what? I think it's probably strong enough for the job. So before I cut it out, to make things a little bit easier for me, I'm going to drill the little holes first, into which I'm going to put a tow ball. Because the drill is so fine, my battery drill can't grip it. So I'm using this modeler's hand drill. I don't know what you call it really. It's a push you pull me. Takes a very long time. Eventually it breaks through. I know I'm not exactly in the right spot, but I do compensate later. And when I cut the metal out, I cut it slightly outside the line that I've drawn to compensate for my inaccuracy with the drilling. So I'm going to do them one at a time, so I just halve that, so I've got one on each piece. Using the Dremel with the abrasive cutting wheel, it just runs through this metal like it's a hot knife through butter, and you can do some minor shaping and preliminary rounding off of the corners using it as you go. Now here you can see I've ground down 1 millimeter off of the top rear base plate there, and that is so that when this fits to the model it won't be in contact with the model. As you could see at the top there was the tow bar tongue extends underneath the rear bumper, so you have to have a gap there, otherwise it will hit the rear bumper and the base won't fit on properly. Now after I've ground down a little groove there to seat the tongue into, I line it up in my vise with a set of helping hands, and I make sure the tongue's got a very slight upward tilt. That is when it's fitted to the model, so it looks like the original. I'm using this Muggy Weld product again, and I found the key is to use a little bit of flux. I didn't know this before, but I read the instructions for a change, and it says use flux, use flux, use flux, and I didn't really think it would make that much difference, but it does, because when it goes brown, you know you got the temperature right, and the metal should just about be ready to melt when you touch it on there. You just rub it around, keep applying heat. Don't actually heat the probe itself, the rod of metal. You just heat what you're touching with it, and it melts onto that surface and just bleeds into where the solder has run, and it is an excellent product. And I'm such an amateur with this kind of thing. And yet, look at that. Okay, the brown stuff, which is scrape off with a knife. But look at that under there, how it's created a beautiful fillet weld, or whatever you call it. It's just, the product has, under its own steam, I don't know what you call it, capillary action. Does molten metal have capillary action? I guess it does. But it's run all everywhere where it should have run, and virtually nowhere where it shouldn't have run. So it's a really easy cleanup with just some dental tools, little files, and a bit of emery paper. And there you go. Now I'm doing a test fit here, and you can see what I mean about how I've had to leave a gap at the rear there so it wasn't touching the underside of the bumper bar. And I must say, I've said it before but I'll say it again, I'm happy with that. As it so happens, the first one I did was the best one. The second one, maybe I got a little bit too confident. I didn't go into it with a focused mindset as such as I did with the first one. And the second one didn't turn out quite as good, but they're both suitable replacements that a man on a galloping horse would not even know that they had been repaired. The toe ball actually is a piece of the same size drill that I drilled the hole with. I just cut it off, rounded the end off and super glued it in, and it looks great. Now here's the windscreen on one of them. It's been painted yellow and silver. I've had a go already at cleaning one side. I noticed though that there's a crack right across the top there that I was fearful would continue to get worse as I worked with the transparency. So before I go any further, just so I reinforce it with a bit of epoxy resin, and then I can, when it's set, I can go hard on it with the cleaning. I put that little circular sticker dot there over the hole because if any of the epoxy went through the hole and on the other side, then that would probably stop it being able to be reinserted into the model at the end. And I don't really want a huge amount, only enough here just to go over that little area that I've roughed up on both sides, and I don't want so much that it's visible from the outside when the model's back together. So just a tiny little drop there, one eyedropper each will do it. Now I turn my attention back to the body and drill out these posts and tap them so I can put the screws in, as I always do, to put them back together again. Some people don't like it. I think it's not a bad alternative because anyone in the future can just pull it apart, change the colour, put it back together again, put a new windscreen in, whatever they want to do. Because I'm using the metallic paints, I thought I'd go with a white primer for a change. I thought maybe it might make the metallic paint sort of a little bit brighter. Not being one for using metallic paint very often, I'm unfamiliar with how it reacts or looks on different surfaces. So basically this is all a learning experience for me with the metal welding and the use of the metallic paints. Kind of in an area that I'm not comfortable being in. I should say I'm out of my comfort zone. But this fantastic little paint mixer here, I heard people say, "Oh, I got one of those. I don't ever stop using it now. I don't know how I managed without it." Well, I'm beginning to see why. They're a great little device. What I like about it is the motor's so weak that you can just hold it with your finger and insert it into the paint first before you start it up. And you can kind of start it up gradually by easing the finger pressure. And there's no splattering, splashing or spillages or anything. So this red paint is of course for the bases. Now I'm just doing a practice spray on the inside of the base, so if it splatters, no one will see it. Anyway, I'm happy with how the paint was coming out, so I went ahead and did the the outside, the visible sides. Again, on the second one I start on the inside and then work my way out. That way if there's any debris in the nozzle, hopefully it'll be blasted out. Here's a shout out to SMS, the scale modeler suppliers, who have sent me this beautiful metallic paint which is pre-mixed, and I've only used it once before on the motorbike selection that I did, and I must admit I was very impressed with how beautifully smooth this paint went on. And me being, I mean, I'm not a professional by any means, me being a mere hobbyist, it makes my job easier to have such a superior product in my toolkit, so to speak. Now, I tried to cheat here. I didn't have any metallic green, so I used this metallic green from Mr. Hobby. I thought it's quite similar to what I thought the original was. And I sprayed it on and had a look at it, and I thought, yuck, it's way too dark. It's dark and bright and looks non-vintage. So that has to go. So I had to strip all that off again. That was a big mistake. Another second mistake was leaving these wheels in some brake fluid overnight to clean, because they've got paint on them. So I thought, I'd had enough for one day, I'm off to bed. I'll get up tomorrow morning, I'll clean those wheels. And I 100% thought those wheels were metal. They looked metal, they felt like metal, and I was confident that they were metal. So the next morning, I go in and I'm thinking, they don't look as good as they did as I remember them, but I'll forge ahead with my plan, which was to give them a blast in the ultrasonic cleaner. And here's a tip to save cleaning fluid that somebody mentioned. You don't need the whole thing full of cleaning fluid. You need a receptacle like this glass jar full of the cleaning fluid, and the remainder of the chamber can be full of just normal water. Apparently, I don't know how it works, I'm not a scientist, but the ultrasound waves travel through and affect the stuff in the glass jar. Now, this is the tyres when I got them out. Okay, sure, the paint came off very easily, as you can see here. Sometimes I had to put them on here just because my fat fingers, I couldn't handle them too well. But they kind of, the more I looked and worked with them, the more I thought, I don't think these are metal. And I kind of thought they looked a little bit puffed up, and they were a little bit sad, and actually some of them were sticky and had actually melted. So I had to replace 4 of them with some spares that I had in my wheel drawer. So luckily I had them, and the other ones have gone away now to wheel heaven, I suppose. This paint has really wrecked these transparencies. It's affected the plastic, it's made it go all pitted and frosted. And the only thing I could do was hit them with some emery paper and get continually finer and finer. They didn't come up perfect. This one here was the best of the bunch. That gold paint that was along the top of the front ridge there couldn't budge it. It stained the plastic. This is the other one that I repaired with the errrr. That section on the front could not do anything with it. It's frosted, dirty looking and horrible. So I just stuck with it as it was. There I hit it with a soft buffing wheel a little bit for 1 second too long, and it melted the edge. I checked, I put a test fit in the car, you won't see it in the finished product, so I dodged a bullet there. Anyway, the final thing for this, my final technique to try on these transparencies is an old favourite of mine, to dip them in this self-shining floor polish and pray. Sometimes this creates a miracle. Sometimes they come out looking roughly the same as when they went in, but it's always worth a try. If you can't get new, you do the best you can, which is all I'm trying to do at the moment. Maybe in the future, since as I've screwed those bases on, I might be able to take them off and put some reproduction windscreens in if I feel the need. I was just pointing out there, you don't want to leave any bubbles on these things before you leave them to dry, because you'll end up with a line across them where the edge of the bubble is. Now this paint isn't amazing. It's not the paint, it's my painting, and the standard of the preparation probably could have gone the extra yard. But I am pressed for time, and I did want to get this out so you guys could see it. I love these vehicles. They're very detailed and cool looking. They're popular, the Cadillacs in America. I mean, who wouldn't want to drive around in one of these? So what I've done is I've masked off the roof and also the frame around the windscreen there. I thought it would add my extra little spin on it. Don't think the originals are quite like that, but I'm thinking it's going to look quite cool. Now what I did there was I just sealed the edges of the masking tape with some clear coat before painting them with the top coat. When I'm mixing up the top coat for the roof, I'm adding just a tiny amount of that leveling solution, and I'm hoping that the roofs, because they're the bit that's going to be seen, I'm hoping it's going to look really, really nice, the roof in particular. When I've finished painting them, I'm looking at them and thinking, I'm hoping these are going to look really good. After about a 20-minute drying time, it's still tacky and soft, but you know, I'm only human. You can't wait to get this masking tape off and see what a mess you've made. But I'm really lucky. None of the top coat paint pulled off, and the edges that I masked ended up being quite crisp on both models. So I think possibly I'm improving in this area. I'm picking up hints and tips from people that leave comments. It's an amazing amount of information to absorb doing this hobby. You wouldn't think so, but there's so much to know, so many tricks of the trade. One of which is this, the axle reforming system of 2 nails in a drill chuck. And you just pull down and flatten the end of that axle. Blow off the thing. Under this extreme magnification, it looks so rough, but hey, it looks like the real thing in real life. You'd think it came straight from the Matchbox factory. Now that the floor shine has set, it's time to put the windshields back in. So I'm using a small dollop of this clear silicone, only a small amount. Don't want it to squeegee out when you push the windscreen in. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm pushing it very gently into position, and there is a very subtle click as it pops over the remnant of its original attachment point, that rivet that I drilled out with a shallow drill. And it's such a great feeling when you're putting these things back together. Now, it wasn't that long ago when I was putting the wheels back on, I realised why these rear axles had no mushrooming on the ends when I pulled them apart, and you'll see why in a second when I put this model back together. Those rear wheels are held in by the sides of the car at the back there. See how they overlap the wheels? There's no way those wheels are going to come out because the axles are long enough to prevent the wheels from coming out by slipping between the end of the axle and the inside of the rear of the car there. So that's a great design feature right there. And also a time saver for Matchbox, because they didn't have to form those axle ends. Now the finishing touches are the painting of the silver. Now you can go really overboard with these things, and some people do, and they come up with some really nice customs. But my original plan was to have one of each model in a display case that looked like an original out of the box. That was my first idea when I started this channel, and since then I have wandered slightly, but I'm trying to get back on track, and I'm pleased to say that I've had a few really nice additions to my collection recently, and I might be up for another custom in another week or so. But these two are going straight in the cupboard after. The 27C Cadillac 60 Special, Matchbox Lesney, this is what they looked like when I got them, and this is what they look like now. And there is no such thing as a perfect makeover. So get it as best as you can, and you've done a good job. If you can get it as best that you can, you've done a good job. You can't do any more, can you? If you've done your best. Well, that's what I've always tried to do, and these two models in the cupboard look beautiful. They look like new models sitting there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. You may have noticed there was no Kevin this week. Unfortunately, he's feeling a little bit under the weather, as am I. You can probably hear my voice is getting a little bit hoarse, and so I shall call it quits now. Go and have a drink, and I look forward to reading your comments. So thanks for watching. Goodbye. What the heck is going on with this thing? Oh, it's on wide angle, you stupid prick.